1600.
WWRL.
New York.
An Access One communications radio station.
Yetta Kurland's on the air. It's Yetta Kurland Live. Yetta Kurland, listen in.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Yetta Kurland Live. I am your host, Yetta Kurland, and tonight we will be speaking with former New York City Comptroller and Democratic candidate for mayor, Bill Thompson. Later we'll hear from some student leaders working in New Jersey with some of the communities hardest hit by Superstorm Sandy. We'll also speak with Maria Mall about an upcoming United Nations conference on sexual orientation and gender identity in a globalized world. I first want to thank our media partners, Go Magazine, Labor Press, the Soho Journal, Westview News, and the New Civil Rights Movement for helping make this show happen, as well as our community sponsor, The Ritz. You can pick up a copy of the Westview News at 69 Charles Street. Check out Go Magazine at your local newsstand or at gomag.com. The Soho Journal is at sohojournal.com. The New Civil Rights Movement is at thenewcivilrightsmovement.com. And Labor Press is at laborpress.org. Also, you can listen to us live stream at WWRL1600.com. And please join us on Facebook at Yetta Kurland Live, on Twitter at Yetta Kurland, and check us out on the Huffington Post at huffingtonpost.com/Yetta. This week in the news, Uruguay's Senate passed a marriage equality bill, as several more U.S. senators, including now our second Republican, endorsed same-sex marriage here in this country. A bipartisan group of senators working with labor unions and the Chamber of Commerce released the outlines of a deal on real immigration reform. The details are still outstanding, but it seems to include a path to citizenship for millions of our undocumented neighbors. Supporters of more oil pipelines scrambled to respond to a major blowout in Arkansas, where part of the proposed KXL Canadian tar sands pipeline flooded a town with toxic sludge. Here in the city, a state senator, a New York City council member, and several party bosses were arrested on federal charges of bribery and corruption related to the upcoming race for mayor, as fair elections campaign finance laws in Albany took front and center, and thousands gathered around the state to support these proposed laws, including here in New York City. A court again suspended attempts to close Long Island College Hospital, that's List Hospital in Brooklyn, and the first bike share bicycles started to appear. We'll be talking about politics, equality, money, and more here on Yetta Kurland Live with Bill Thompson, Maria Mall, students from MST University, and you, the listeners. Please call in with questions or comments. The number to do so is 212-868-0975. Again, that number is 212-868-0975. I'm very excited to get to our first guest, so let's go directly to him. He is a longtime friend and advocate for New Yorkers. Brooklyn native Bill Thompson has worked for this city as head of the Board of Education, as comptroller from 2001 to 2009 for New York City, and as an activist and city leader. In 2009, he was the Democratic and Working Families Party nominee for mayor of the city of New York, and despite being outspent 14-1, came within a few points of winning against incumbent Michael Bloomberg. He's now campaigning again for the mayor's job in 2013. I'm delighted to have him here back with us on Yetta Kurland Live today to talk about that and more. If you've got questions or comments, please call in 212-868-0975. Again, that number is 212-868-0975. Bill, welcome back to Yetta Kurland Live.
Yetta, it's great to be back with you.
Yeah.
It's always good.
Thank you. You have been very busy. There's been a lot of mayoral forums, a lot going on in your race. We're going to get to that. How's the campaign trail going?
Things are moving along well. We're building a campaign, reaching across the city of New York, getting people involved on a daily basis, and I'm feeling very good about the direction of things.
It seems like you're everywhere. Do you feel like folks in Manhattan have the same issues as folks in Brooklyn, the Bronx? Are you seeing a difference on issues and what's important bunch of New Yorkers? Are you going around?
I think that what you're seeing is, New Yorkers across the board, whether it is in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, or Staten Island, or Manhattan, are being squeezed in different ways. If you look at, working middle-class people are being squeezed each and every day. It is harder and harder to be able to afford to live in the city of New York. So it's not just Manhattan now. You look across the city of New York, the policies that the city pursues in a number of ways. If you look at assessments on properties, whether you own or rent, it's been tougher, and they've been going up in spite of the fact that valuation wasn't going up at a certain point. Water rates, so many other different things. The affordability gap in the city of New York is getting worse for all New Yorkers except the super wealthy. That's what you're seeing across New York City. So we're tied together across the city in a number of issues: education, job creation, public safety, you name it. But more than anything, that affordability gap is squeezing everybody.
You mentioned education. You were ahead of the Board of Education. Obviously, there's a big conversation about mayoral control. What's your position on that, and what do you think the hope for the schools, the teachers, and parents are?
I think that education clearly is one of the major issues, not just in the campaign, but major issues that face the city of New York. And if there was a person who was probably the wrong person to start mayoral control under, it was probably Mike Bloomberg, who didn't want to hear from parents, doesn't want to hear from the public, and really has not focused on, in at least himself getting involved in education. Has hired chancellors who don't have educational backgrounds and said, hey, go run a school system. I think that what we need an educational chancellor again, somebody at the head of a system who understands education and educational philosophy and helps to put forward an educational vision, who again, makes education collaborative and doesn't, demonize the teachers and principals, who doesn't create this, my way or the highway type situation. I think that's important. It is, what's happened is you had a workforce now, the teachers who can't stand the people who run the system and the principals who are scared of them. And I just think that, the opportunity to really grow. And then when you look at where is the system, how are our children doing? The answer is not well. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest
13% of Latino and African American graduates are not college ready. I mean, the statistics are
you're starting to look at you look at young people who are in, New York City public school graduates who are in, community colleges. 80% of them need remediation. 80% of them aren't ready to do college level work. Yeah. That's a staggering number. It's a frightening number. So what the system is doing is failing. And I mean, if you looked at the announcement yesterday, what was it? 76 new schools are going to open in September. The question is, how many of those new schools, are schools that you closed? Exactly. And that's the question to ask. It's not a question of, are you opening new schools? How many of those are admissions of failures? How many of those are schools that you closed and basically gave up on our children and gave up on neighborhoods? That's the question to ask. Yeah, no, the statistics are always, it's like the joke about an accountant asks you, or you ask a statistician, an accountant, what would you like the numbers to be? And the statistician can always play with the numbers, right? Exactly. So, and Bloomberg has closed a lot of schools. He can close down a big school and then open, 3 or 4 boutique schools. Yes. So he's actually reducing the amount of class size, but can boast that he's increased 4 or more schools. Exactly. And so the question really becomes not how many schools have you opened. The question starts to become how many schools have you closed? Right. And that's the thing. And how many of those schools that you reopen, how many of those have failed also? Right. So it really is about, we need to focus again on making sure that we tell the truth. Yeah. That we stop spinning the numbers. Yeah. That the education system, that the chancellor and the mayor tell the people of the city the truth. How are we really doing? What are we trying to accomplish? And how we should be held accountable. You are listening to former comptroller and mayoral candidate Bill Thompson here on Yetta Kurland Live, WWRL 1600 AM Equality Pride Radio. Call us with questions or comments. 212-868-0975 is the number to do so. 212-868-0975. Bill, I do want to get into the disheartening scandal that broke open yesterday, but we got a bunch of people calling in, so let's take a couple callers, and I'm going to circle back to that. We'll go to Peter from Manhattan. Peter, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Yes, hello, Mr. Thompson.
Hi, how are you, Peter?
I'm fine, sir. I'm a little disheartened when it comes to black candidates simply because when questioned about what are they going to do for the black American community, they fold like cheap cameras. The fact is, Hispanics and everyone else has jobs in this town. shoe shine boys are all Hispanic. The guys that do the squeegee things, everything is Hispanic. And when a Negro is asked about what are you going to do for us, the first response is, and that includes the president, oh, I can't do anything for y'all because it looked like I'm showing favoritism. What will you do for black employment, sir? I'll hang up and listen.
Okay. There's a lot we could say about that, but I'll let you handle that.
There's a lot, but at the same point, look, there is, if you look at black and Latino communities, the underemployment and unemployment rate is stunning. The number of black men who are unemployed in the city of New York is a frightening, it is a crisis proportion. So we need to talk about job training. We need to talk about job creation. We need to talk about education and making sure that, when our students, if you look at the public school system, a huge percentage of the students are black and Latino, sure. Making sure that when people graduate, they have the skills necessary to either be able to go to college or the world of work with the skills they need to succeed. So there's so many things that have to be done. The one thing I've never done is not to talk about what needs to be done in many communities. So it is job training. Yeah. It is making sure that those are real jobs and jobs that will exist. It's not turning your back on the situation. It is addressing it and starting to deal with it.
Leveling the playing field, creating educational opportunity, job opportunities, and opportunities in general.
And it's also, as we look at a city that is becoming, the jobs that are created are either, lower paying jobs or high-tech jobs that a lot of our people don't have.
Right.
And those people across the board don't have the skills to be able to get those jobs. So it is job training. It is creating real opportunity. It's also growing minority and women-owned businesses in the city of New York. If the state of New York can focus on, trying to get to 20%, and that is one of the things the governor is doing in contracting in the state of New York, why isn't the city of New York trying to do the same thing?
Absolutely. And, obviously, let's talk about race as it plays out. Do communities of color feel like they have been listened to, respected, and heard under the current administration? And how do we deal with some of the problems that also impact class and working New Yorkers that you talked about earlier?
Absolutely not. Communities of color across the city of New York feel that they have been ignored and not listened to. And one of the things, let me also say, if you talk to people across the city, and now this isn't just communities of color, go talk to the people in Staten Island. Mm-hmm. Talk to the people in Queens or the Bronx or Brooklyn. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, in big pieces of Manhattan, they have felt left out. They felt that no one has spoken to them in years, and really that the person who sits in City Hall has not represented them, has not listened to them, has not worked for them. That's a problem, and that's what, when I talk about being a mayor for all New Yorkers, people of this city outside of Manhattan and in Manhattan want to be heard. And they want to be represented. They understand they're part of the city of New York. They want a mayor who understands that also.
That's right.
And I think that's one of the things. Exactly.
Certainly. You're listening to former comptroller and mayoral candidate Bill Thompson here on Yetta Kurland Live. We are going to take your calls in a moment. But, Bill, let's talk about what happened yesterday. Senator Malcolm Smith, Councilmember Dan Halloran. It's early yet, but what's your take on the story, and why are we hearing yet another story of corruption in government?
It is, in looking at the U.S. Attorney's press conference yesterday, it was incredibly disheartening, where he basically talks about almost what was it, Groundhog Day? Yeah. It is, we've seen this before, and I just think that the whole, a culture in some ways, and look, the first thing we need to do, a number of elected officials, I do too. The vast majority of our elected officials are hardworking. They want to get things done. They want to represent their constituents and do the best they can. But we continue to have, as you do in almost every profession, you continue to have those who believe that being an elected official is, a license to be able to steal. Yeah. That's wrong. But I think that there were a number of things in this convoluted process that involved a number of people and just undermines a process. It is, it continues to say to the public, don't trust elected officials.
It does. It really perpetuates this very unfortunate perception.
So it was that. I mean, that was very disheartening. Again, very disappointing. Also, the other part of it that I found very troubling. The councilman, Halloran, who was talking about basically getting money in return for giving his discretionary dollars. Yeah. We saw this in the city council before. It was supposed to have been dealt with by the leadership of the city council.
Yeah,
and it's clear it's still
let me
a
ask you a
problem.
question about that, because a couple of the other mayoral candidates clashed on positions on what they would or wouldn't do with these discretionary funds. Do you have a position on how it should be dealt?
I mean, I don't believe that one person can make all of the decisions for the city of New York, so I'm not against discretionary funds. At the same point, I think that there has to be a very open and transparent process that makes sure that, where's the oversight, that we vet all this, that we make sure that it's going for, the appropriate purposes. And in fact, those are the agencies that need to make sure that happens. At the same point also, what you don't want to see, discretionary dollars in some ways should also be driven by need. Right. Communities that need that need the additional services for seniors, for our young people and other things, we should make sure it goes there. And one of the things, and now it isn't just a point of finger, the story, in the New York Times that spoke about how the Speaker of the City Council, Christine Quinn, was using discretionary funds or taking discretionary funds away from not the council people, but their communities to punish them. You need to stop that. So each council person, there should be a baseline.
Right. And there's a need. I mean, you could argue that there's a valid need for discretionary funds because it fills the gaps. If there's specific needs, real needs, valid needs in a community, that's reasonable. But it has to be transparent.
Exactly. And there are a number of small community-based organizations that, would get ignored on a larger level. Right. And that's where, the recommendation of a council person could be helpful. Right.
And participatory budgeting obviously is one way.
That's an
Brad
excellent
Lander
way.
is trying to do some of this.
I know Brad has, I believe, Jumani Williams and some others are really doing that. That's a really good way of being able to involve people in a more transparent process, also to empower people. Right. And to be able to get them involved on a real basis, to remove some of the cynicism and be able to see if you get involved, you can have an impact on your community.
No, it really does. And Melissa, Mark Viverito, all those guys in the Progressive Caucus taking a leadership role in the participatory budgeting. In fact, I think there was a vote today or recently on participatory budgeting in Brooklyn. But it's like it invites people to get involved. It shows the kind of transparency that can happen. And then what happens is a group of community members get together and they just become civic-minded. They start to realize, this group does need it more than this group, or this is the way we solve this problem.
And bringing, getting young people involved and having them involved. And wait a second, and then seeing a result for the work that they've done. All of that is, I just think it helps to empower people. I think it interests them, gets them involved, and I really think in a lot of ways it's the wave of the future.
And it was great to see Citizen Action, 1199, a bunch of other community organizations coming together today with the fair election stuff. It's interesting timing that would happen yesterday. Yes. So, it's just a big wake-up call for us. Let's try to get to some of our other callers. We're going to go next to Sarah from Brooklyn. Sarah, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air. Sarah, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Thompson how you felt about the CUNY schools in New York, how you wanted to make them more affordable for students right now that are pretty young, 18-year-olds, and still keep the quality up and keep it accessible for them.
Great question.
I think one of the great success stories, if you will, and that I've seen in the last 20 years in New York City has been the improvement in our CUNY schools. And that is something that we should all be very proud of. I've given Matt Goldstein, the chancellor there, and others a huge amount of credit for really restoring value to our city university system. Part of what we need to do, and this is where, we need to create a closer tie-in between the city university system and the New York City public school system. Our graduates have to be better prepared when they finish, when they graduate, to be able to get into the 4-year CUNY institutions. We're starting to see more competition. You're getting more people from outside of the city who are coming to CUNY institutions. So we need to have, CUNY do less remediation on the community college level because we do a better job at preparation. And then as we look at, realizing that right now it costs more, we have to start to hold the line. Yeah. And just making sure that we maintain that accessibility so that, it isn't what it used to be. As far as accessibility, as far as cost or no cost, we have to make sure we hold the line right now. And education is, the vehicle is the ladder for so many people to be able to have a future, to be able to have a middle-class life. That's what we need to maintain, that opportunity, both in CUNY as well as, you look at the 2-year colleges, our community colleges. They should we need to do a better job on a public school system so that they can focus not on remediation. And what we're seeing is, young people who are winding up in community colleges, they're burning their grant money out on remediation.
Right.
That's outrageous.
Instead of focusing on science, technology, all the burgeoning.
And honestly, that's where in the 2-year institutions, we should be focused on job preparation, on helping people have the job skills that they need to be able to move forward and succeed.
You're listening to former Comptroller and Mayoral Candidate Bill Thompson here on Yetta Kurland Live. Call in with questions or comments, 212-868-0975, 212-868-0975. Let's go to our next caller, David from Flatbush. David, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Hi, Yetta. Hi, Bill.
Hey, David. How are you?
Not bad, thanks. I saw you at the forum tonight. You did great.
Oh, thank you. You were at the forum.
Yeah, I was there earlier.
Tell you what, it was huge attendance. I mean, that's the one thing that really made you feel good, that so many people came out and so many people are concerned about where New York City goes in the future. So it was great to see such a huge turnout tonight.
Well, the question I have for you is one I'm sure you're probably familiar with. I'm an animal advocate in New York City, and we have a lot of people who care about all different kinds of animals. And I was wondering, from your position, if you were mayor, what would your top priorities be on animal welfare in New York City?
Well, I think making sure that institutions like this, the Center for Animal Care and Control, are better done, because I think that what you're seeing is, as far as making sure that they do the job that is necessary. I just don't think they're doing that. You're looking at spots, across the city of New York and boroughs that there are no shelters there. There's no opportunity for animals to be able to be treated humanely and safely. I think those are some of the things, really providing it, if you will, an outside revenue stream. And a lot of that may have to be done privately and worked on along with, money from the city. But it is just, what we've seen over a period of years, it has not been well done. And I think that one of the things that, in the forum this evening that was talked about, if we're going to provide a revenue stream, registration fees for, being able to licensing for our animals, making sure that that's done and using that revenue stream to be able to provide the services that are needed and do it humanely. I think that's what needs to occur.
Great. We're going to switch venues a little bit and go to a couple Twitter questions. Someone writes, what would you do to get the city local oversight of the MTA transit in Washington Heights, Inwood, which is deplorable, a quality of life issue?
Some of it, and you're right. I mean, I've taken the train up to Washington Heights and particularly on the A line, and that's needs to be a lot better done. In the end, a lot of this comes down to, it's not just focus, it's resources and dollars.
Yeah.
And one of the things, if there is one thing that is regional in nature, it is mass transit. It's our public system and being able to get around. You look at Washington Heights and stations that are not up to where they should be. You look at parts of the city in Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Queens, and parts of the Bronx, where people, to be able to get, it's not a question of subways, it's a question of buses and the lack of bus routes.
Yeah.
It's the necessity for a revenue stream. And one of the things I've advocated for a while is, 2 ways to be able to increase the financing for public transportation. One, it's a registration. It is increase of registration fees based on weight. So you have a heavier fuel-guzzling SUV. It costs you more to register your car or register your SUV than a lighter, more fuel-efficient vehicle. That's one way, being able to use that, and particularly in those counties that are covered by the MTA, that can generate close to $1 billion if you did that. And then, people talked about and used to have a commuter tax. They got rid of it years ago. Well, a commuter tax to be brought back for mass transit alone. People couldn't agree on bringing commuter tax back for the city of New York,
right,
where we got the revenue, but for mass transit, if you did that, those in New Jersey and Connecticut and upstate and Long Island, they have an interest. If you work in the city of New York, whether you drive or use mass transit, you have an interest in a strong mass transit system. That generates another $750 million to $1 billion. Now, all of a sudden, we've got, $1.7 billion to $2 billion extra a year, which can be used to upgrade stations, which can be used to provide select bus service, express bus services to underserved neighborhoods. Now, all of a sudden, we start to have a mass transit system that works a lot better for the people.
Great. Let's go to our next question. Ed from Jamaica. Ed, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Yetta.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Good.
Good evening, Mr. Thompson.
Good evening, Ed. How you doing?
I'm all right. I campaigned for you, by the way, last time.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Come on back out again.
We'll do better this time.
Tell you, we're going to get it done this time.
I hope so. Brother. But my question is particularly pertaining to the Inspector General proposal put forward by the City Council and your position on it. First, a comment. Frankly, I think it's just throwing the people a bone. I mean, how can you have an Inspector General that's tied to the mayor's office, the same person that appoints the police commissioner, and give him a 7-year period when a new mayor comes in after another term? Will he be relieved? How is he? I think the office should be more independent, maybe even put to a vote by the people of New York, because there's too many problems with this police department as far as prejudice, as far as misconduct, as far as out-and-out murder. And we need a new, fresh way to deal with this, because I'm getting tired of going to marches for people getting shot in the back, people getting shot for no reason, people and burying people, man. I mean, this is a serious, serious problem, and it's not being addressed sincerely, I feel, by the City Council or by any elected official. Your comment.
Thanks for your comment.
Ed first, and you know something, and one of the things, and if you look at the council legislation, and by the way, let me give Councilman Jumaane Williams a lot of credit, you know, for really working and trying to get something done here, and he's really been a strong champion.
Yes, he has.
And I got to give him credit. You know, the Inspector General aside for a second, and the issue comes down to, you know, and by the way, there are things that can't be done that the City Council can't infringe upon, legally can't infringe upon the authority of the mayor. So the IG in the end has to be selected by the mayor, and by and large reports to the mayor. They can't get around that. This is a question, it goes past an IG and goes to a question of leadership. And that's why, you know, it matters who the mayor is of the city of New York, and then who the police commissioner is. The commissioner isn't the mayor. The police commissioner works for the mayor of the city of New York. So we look at issues like, you know, like stop and frisk and other things. Those are issues that are being driven by a mayor as well as by a police commissioner. I've said and have been honest, I think it's important to bring my own team to the table. And, you know, when it comes to issues of making sure that there's real oversight, making sure that things like stop and frisk are used correctly, making sure the policing processes are done correctly and done the way that it's supposed to, I want to have the responsibility for that. I want to be in charge of that. I will select a police commissioner. I've been honest that I believe it's important to bring someone new to the table. Because I just, you know, as I said, I think you want to bring your own person and your own police commissioner in to implement the vision. I think it falls back on the mayor, and this is a leadership question. So all of the IG, no IG, it comes back to, in the end, are you going to be in charge of the city of New York? Are you going to be responsible for policing and making sure that the city stays safe and that all neighborhoods are safe and treated fairly? That's what it comes down to.
Great. We're going to try to squeeze in one last caller for this segment. Let's go to Jeff from Manhattan. Jeff, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Hi. Good evening, Mr. Thompson.
Good evening. How are you?
Great. I, as someone that was on top of our fiscal situation as controller and studied, you know, how the city taxes or where receipts come from, I was wondering if you had some favorite ideas about diversifying the city a bit away from over-reliance on finance, insurance, and real estate industries, which may or may not expand in the future and may or may not employ lots of city residents.
You know, as you look at the future of the city and our economy, I think that this is one point, and I've been, you know, very critical of the mayor. This is one place where I'm going to give him some credit. I think as you look at the focus and the whole focus on the applied sciences, looking at the Cornell Initiative in Roosevelt Island, it's an opportunity, as well as some of the other ideas that came out there, it's an opportunity to make New York City the high-tech capital of the world. And I think that is one of the areas that would help to diversify our economy. We have to make sure that our people can get the jobs, and that's one of the things I'm focused on. But, you know, I applaud the mayor in that area. That's one area. I think if you look at continued growth in tourism, that is another area across the city of New York that will really help us grow. And, you know, we need to continue the focus there, and there's so many things that go into doing that. But I think that also one of the areas that the city of New York has not done a good job in is small business growth.
I was waiting for that.
You know, is small business growth, and that's the
absolutely.
area. That's the growth engine for the city of New York in all 5 boroughs.
Yep.
And they have done a horrible job as far as using those small businesses as kind of a cash cow. We need to focus in helping to grow that. You need to look and start to use some of your contracts to be able to help grow small and mid-sized businesses in the city of New York. Focus on minority and women-owned businesses and growing that. That creates an additional economic growth engine for the city of New York. And then just starting to look at other niche areas. What's happening around the world, where are the growth areas, and getting in front of that, as well as we're going to have to be honest. Some of this is the banks aren't lending. We're going to have to come up with some creative ideas in creating pools of capital to help grow those businesses. So I think I would agree. We just can't fall back on what we have always, used, the fire industry, the financial industry and real estate and others. We're going to have to continue to grow and look at the new economies in the future.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Thanks for sharing your ideas with us. We'll have you back on again, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's great being in studio with you. It's good seeing you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. I apologize to all the callers who didn't get a chance to ask Bill questions, but stick around for the next segment. We're going to take a short break, and we will come back on Yetta Kurland Live here on WWRL 1600, Equality Pride Radio.